Welcome back to another competitive speculation video. Today we're talking about Snorlax, and I'm going to very quickly glance over the fact that it's a normal type, because there's not a whole lot going on with normal as far as offense goes. There's nothing weak to it, and it does not hit Rock or Steel very well, nor is it able to hit Ghost without Scrappy. And defensively, it does not take damage from Ghost, and is weak to fighting. That's literally all there is to it. And yes, the best Terra type to pair with normal is Ghost. So there you go. Now to get into the more interesting stuff. The abilities on Snorlax are relatively good. The weakest of these is immunity, which prevents poison. That's not particularly useful. Thick Fat is good because fire and ice type damage is reduced by 50%. So you can take blizzards quite well with Snorlax if you have this. And Gluttony is also very good, because the typical pinch berries like Figgy will activate at citrus berry range instead of when you're below 33%. Which, for the most part, Gluttony is the most commonly used ability for Snorlax, and I'll get into why in a little bit. Now, Snorlax actually has pretty good stats. It's really slow at 30 base speed, Trick Room speed basically, and this is obviously a physical attacker at 110 base physical attack. The special attack is pretty mediocre, you're probably never going to use that. And the bulk on this Pokemon is quite solid. You have 160 base hit points with 110 on special defense, so you can take a fair bit of hits on the special side. Although the physical defense is a bit weak, it's not too bad because of the high hit point stat kind of offsets it. So outside of like a Choice Band Urshifu, you can take a hit on the physical side as well. And speaking of Urshifu, let's just take a look at the numbers that a Choice Band Urshifu can do into just this relatively bulky Snorlax. It's kind of set up for physical defense to offset the poor physical defense, with a little bit of offense investment in Adamant. Curiously, it does survive Wicked Blow, which is a bit of a surprise to me, considering that's Choice Band Adamant damage. Close combat though, there's no chance you're living that. You do, however, get a chance of living it if you have Reflect up, so that is something to consider. And if we take a look at a reasonable spread of Snorlax's moveset, Hammer Arm does a decent amount of damage into Urshifu, but otherwise you're really not doing a whole lot. I have Stomping Tantrum here instead of High Horsepower because in Gen 9, a lot of Pokemon lost access to high horsepower, and I think it's reasonable to assume Snorlax would get the same treatment. Now, while these numbers are not particularly impressive, Snorlax is a bit of an interesting Pokemon in that typically the way it's played is designed to sit there and buff in front of you. And oftentimes, back in Gen 7 and even Gen 8, they were Belly Drum. So let's take a look at Belly Drum damage with this build. And Body Slam is a guaranteed one-hit KO. Wild Charge is even a guaranteed one-hit KO. There's no chance of surviving that Hammer Arm, and Stomping Tantrum is the weakest of the moves, and it has a chance of a one-hit KO. So obviously, there's a lot of offense to work around with Snorlax if you are running the Belly Drum build. But there was also a Curse build that was used for a while, so let's say you get one boost from that. Your offense is really not that impressive. Body Slam does have a guaranteed 2-hit KO onto Urshifu though. You also have a slim chance of living the close combat. But at that point, 2 Wicked Blows is a guaranteed 2-hit KO, so no amount of buffing is going to save you there. Snorlax gets access to a lot of moves because it's a normal type. Some of those are likely going to be taken away. As I mentioned earlier, High Horsepower, but also Darkest Lariat because that's not in Gen 9 currently. So it's likely Snorlax will not have that either. It does get a bunch of other stuff though, like Body Press, Heat Crash, Heavy Slam, Iron Head, Gunk Shot, Zen Headbutt, Seed Bomb, Crunch, Outrage. You got about every typing you can think of to work with outside of Fairy and Bug. Even some of those more powerful special moves like Ice Beam and Thunder. And if you really want to get weird with it, it does get Whirlpool in case you want to run it as purely a stall build. But it's probably the supportive moves that really give Snorlax its gimmick. So it has the Recycle, Stockpile, Swallow setup. There's also moves like Screech, Metronome, Yawn, Amnesia. There's Belly Drum, Charm, several of the weathers, Encore, Workup, there's also Curse, Gastro Acid, and even Counter. Based on the stats and the typing of Snorlax, as well as the moveset, it's designed for buffing, and it's one of the most optimized Pokemon for buffing in VGC. And while the viability of that has slowly diminished over the years, it was really good for a while in Gen 7, back when it got access to full power frustration, and even in Gen 8, a Belly Drum G-Max Snorlax had a massive amount of offense, and was quite the threat. In Gen 9 though, there's the Terrestrialize gimmick, so you can flip its typing. So you could turn this into, say, an electric type and then just start spamming Wild Charge, or turn it into a ghost type and have Terra Blast on it, which being able to flip your typing to where you're immune to, say, a close combat and you just make an Urshifu whiff on you could be really big and be just enough for you to get your Belly Drum off. And as long as you get, say, a redirection Pokemon in with it, like Amoonguss or something, suddenly you can get Snorlax set up to be a big threat immediately. And the amount of teams running Haze has started to drop now that Dondozo has kind of lost its place in the meta to some extent. So there's a world where a Belly Drum Snorlax makes sense again, and could actually be quite useful. Obviously, physical fighting types are a big threat to Snorlax, and the best support for it right now is Amoonguss, which is good, but I think Togekiss would be preferred, but it is also not in the game. So if Togekiss and Snorlax were to show up in like the same DLC, then you could actually run both of them as a lead and get your Belly Drum set up that way. But is Belly Drum still that good that it actually will work? Well, it's hard to say because we don't have a particularly good Belly Drum user currently. I believe Iron Hands gets Belly Drum, which it is quite bulky, so it could be a good Belly Drum user. But I have yet to see an Iron Hands with Belly Drum on it, just because its utility elsewhere is so much better than trying to run it as a max offense Pokemon. And there's already slow or a lot less commitment to set up, such as Ursaluna. So the practicality of Belly Drum, it's not really there right now, even though there is possibly a way you can get it set up now that Haze has become a lot less popular. But Snorlax does not have to be run as a Belly Drum offense. You can also run it as Curse offense, which it does fairly well with. And any of the buffing builds for Snorlax, you run it Gluttony with Recycle. I don't know if I actually covered that it got Recycle or not, but yeah, it does get Recycle, which is a big part of what makes Gluttony so useful. You can keep recycling your Figgyberry, which is really good for the Curse build specifically. But you could just run it as support also, because it gets access to Encore and Yawn, and it has a lot of special bulk. So something like Fluttermane could have a hard time getting past it while it just sits there spamming annoying moves. So this is one of those Pokemon that I don't think is bad. I question how optimized it is for Gen 9 though, and it's really hard for me to predict where in the world this would end up, because I think with the right team core, Snorlax could be a big threat. I just don't know if that team core is going to be able to handle a wide variety of scenarios, and it would really take just having Snorlax available in the game and then experimenting with the different setups to kind of figure out if Snorlax is really viable or not. It's a hard one. It doesn't feel so cut and dry trying to play Snorlax. My guess is somewhere around C tier, that kind of range, because Snorlax usage did go down considerably with the addition of Urshifu, and with Urshifu still being quite common, it's still a big threat to Snorlax that has to be taken care of. And without the best counter to Urshifu ever being Togekiss, it may be a bit difficult to get Snorlax positioned properly, even with Amoonguss by its side. So, I don't know. Snorlax has always been kind of hard to play anyway, so I think just the difficulty of having to set it up would be enough to deter most people. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time.